In our talking point today, we discuss the case of Vic Williams, the army gunner who is today waiting to hear official confirmation of his 14-month prison sentence for desertion after refusing to go to war against Iraq. Gunner Williams, who told his court-martial yesterday that his conscience was clear, was dismissed with disgrace from the army. After speaking out at a peace rally in Hyde Park, he was found guilty of conduct prejudicial to good order and military discipline. I'm joined now by General Sir Anthony Farrer Hockley, a former Commander-in-Chief of Allied Forces in Northern Europe, and by Andy Wilson of the Vic Williams Defence Campaign. Andy Wilson, first of all, the key point is that a soldier knows full well when he joins up that he may be called on to fight.
To be honest with you, I think that that's irrelevant to what's happened in Vic's court-martial, because in fact, soldiers often desert. There'll have been other deserters, other troops went absent during the war, and they'll get 28 days and we'll never hear about them. Vic's really been on trial for a political crime because he spoke out against the government's war aims in the Gulf War.
Sir Anthony, is that right?
Well, we don't know anything about what happened to other people. If anybody else went away deliberately to avoid combat service, he will certainly not have been tried for absence without leave, but for desertion, and he will have incurred a much severer penalty than 28 days unless there are mitigating circumstances.
Let's look at what desertion involves. There has been criticism, Sir Anthony, that the army has no clear procedure for dealing with desertion, for dealing with conscientious objection.
Well, it certainly has. But where it's put in a box is if, just as combat operations begin, a man comes up and says, gosh, I've just decided I'm a conscientious objector. And it can't take account of that sort of thing. If a man, as an adult, has joined in peacetime a combat force and doesn't recognize he may have to go to war, then he wants his head testing. In this particular case, moreover, he joined a combat arm. Nor was he a boy just fresh out of school.
All right, let's put those points to Andy Wilson.
But to me that's irrelevant because, first of all, Vic wasn't a conscientious objector in the sense of refusing to fight under any circumstances. He's a soldier who, for example, has done a tour of Northern Ireland, as far as I understand. His objection was that during training for the Gulf War, the troops were told, and he was told, that the objective in the war was not to liberate Kuwait, but to destroy the Iraqi army. And in fact, I've read his diaries from when he was on the run, and on the day that Saddam Hussein ordered the withdrawal of the troops from Kuwait, Vic's diary says, I know that they will not stop the killing now. And that's exactly what they did. They went on to slaughter Iraqi troops as they withdrew from Kuwait after they'd effectively, pulled out of Kuwait. And that is why Vic's on trial.
We're shifting the ground, you know. Of course the objective was to defeat the Iraqi armies in Kuwait and to actually destroy them. And some would say that it's a very great pity that they were allowed in such large numbers to go back in. The famous story that there was a hidden agenda and we were going to pursue everybody into Iraq and subjugate it has long been exposed as absolute rubbish. I mean, if we have a situation in which you say that the soldiers, sailors and airmen can say, yes, I'll pick to go on that operation, I'm not going on this one, I don't like it, then you will never have armed forces which are worth a damn. We have professional armed forces, and the people in it are supposed to act on a professional contract.
Andy Wilson?
And why shouldn't soldiers be allowed to speak out if they believe that a war is unjust? And, what happened effectively was 200,000 Iraqi conscripts and civilians have been killed. There's a situation now in Iraq where, according to the British Embassy in Amman, they report there's 170,000 children suffering from severe malnutrition. The country
We're shifting ground again.
But that's what the army set out to achieve.
No, this is what Saddam Hussein started. It's got nothing to do with the British Army or Gunner Williams. The fact of the matter is, we don't even know whether there were 200,000 Iraqi soldiers killed. That's a figure plucked out of the air, I may tell you. The fact of the matter is, Williams was told to go on a duty which was to throw Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait. He failed to do it. He deserted even before fighting began.
Let me put this to you, Andy Wilson. Gunner Williams did know what he was doing, and he knew that what he was doing would amount to desertion.
He didn't know that what he was doing would amount to desertion, and that was actually proved for me fairly conclusively in the court-martial. But apart from that, he did know that he was, going absent from duty in order to speak out against the Gulf War. But as far as I and many other people are concerned, that's absolutely to his credit. I mean, in the court-martial, it was said by the prosecution that British soldiers have no right to oppose government policy. Now, in fact, actually, senior officers all the time oppose government policy.
Well, no, they don't.
The defence cuts, they oppose it, and they won't be brought to trial.
They can speak out against government policy within government circles, but none of us who are serving and taking the Crown's salt are allowed, nor should they have any right to speak out against the government. If they want to do that, they get out of government.
So, Anthony, I'd like to put this point to you. Andy Wilson has raised the question of senior officers. The wing commander who lost top secret documents during the war was reprimanded. Is there one law for the officer and one law for the squaddy?
He had much more than that. He had a loss of 6 years seniority.
He wasn't in prison.
But he didn't desert. Nor did, as it happened, I mean, if those plans had gone to the other side, he might very well have been cashiered and sent to prison. You're not comparing like with like here. Of course there's no... I mean, if an officer had deserted, by God, he'd have got at least 10, if not 20 years for it, and quite rightly so.
Last word, Andy Wilson?
Simply, the main issue is about what happened in the Gulf and the destruction of the Iraqi economy and the killing of hundreds of thousands of Iraqi people. Vic spoke out against that, and as I say, that's to his credit, and people should be supporting him, and the conviction and the sentence should be overthrown.
He didn't speak out until he was got hold by a lot of people to persuade him to do it.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there. Andy Wilson, Sir Anthony Farrer-Hockley, thank you both very much indeed for coming in on an emotive subject. A reminder of the main news in a moment. First, Alex in the weather studio.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon.